What is up, Bears fans? Welcome to the Bears Huddle podcast. I'm Aaron James, and this is all your latest UK take on our Chicago Bears. Guys, we're going to talk Jaylon Johnson. Obviously, news yesterday that Jaylon Johnson had been placed on the active non-football related injury list. Now, Case Keenum has returned from that injury. Jaylon Johnson is still on that list. Some people have said that this is a fairly standard thing for Jaylon Johnson. This has happened before. Some people are saying that he just wants more time with his kids. Some people are saying that it's a standard thing with him. Some people are saying that it's actually a bit of a ploy to get a bit more money, given what he said in an interview that he gave the other day. Now, look, I think everyone is kind of saying that, what Ryan Poles did in terms of tying down Jaylon Johnson to a new deal was absolutely fantastic. In terms of that cheap deal that they got. I mean, okay, it's not cheap for people like you and me, but the 14th highest paid cornerback in the league, given the fact that he is one of the very best in the league. Now, in terms of that deal, that deal that Ryan Poles did with Jaylon Johnson, that contract extension that was given to him. He signed a 4-year, $110 million contract back in March 2024, which is one of the most affordable given to a cornerback in the NFL. I think, a lot of it is down, like I said, to the fantastic work that Ryan Poles did in negotiating that contract for someone as absolutely brilliant as Jaylon Johnson. Cornerback is a premium position now in the NFL. Cornerbacks are highly paid, and we've just obviously seen Sauce Gardner get a huge payday. Something obviously that Jaylon Johnson indirectly referenced in the interview that he gave to the Rich Eisen show. I think there's a desire that. I thought the Bears are, pretty much stealing a cornerback at $19 million per season. Johnson obviously did, like I said, sign an extension last off-season, but he feels that there should be really discussion around another contract deal, another deal to kind of bring him in level with those highest paid cornerbacks. Now, I think the Bears will be anxious for that not to happen until next off season. Obviously, with the cap as it is, etc. With player positions still needing to be addressed, and I think there's a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for here? Sort of taking advantage of the situation from some critics and some analysts out there by saying this is down to money. I don't think it is down to money. I think this is just, Jaylon Johnson sounding off, looking for something perhaps next off season. It's not a direct situation and a direct relation to him not being ready to practice from day one. Now, this is what Jaylon Johnson had to say when he spoke to the Rich Eisen show. He says, just seeing a lot of the other corners getting paid, I almost feel like we might have another discussion coming up here soon. The market is moving. The market is moving. As long as I just keep being myself, keep playing at the high level, definitely going to have some more conversations coming up soon. Really keep it long term. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, that quote there from that interview that he gave to the Rich Eisen show around that contract extension, there's a lot of, I think, mixed messages in that statement. That he talks about the fact that he wants a discussion soon. So not really putting a time scale on that. Soon could be any time, couldn't it, realistically? He's right. The market is currently moving. It is obviously really pushing up there. And like I said, Sauce Gardner, is someone who's just obviously received a huge payday. Now, Gardner, who wasn't rated as, the best, he, is regarded as one of the best, and some people think he is the best, but obviously wasn't recently in the PFF ratings and PFN ratings rated as the highest, as the best corner. There was, others ahead of him in that list. Patrick Surtain, obviously, being the key man here. But, in terms of what Sauce Gardner got, and like I said, Sauce Gardner's not even, like I said, the best cornerback in the NFL. He signed a 4-year, $120.4 million extension to that contract, putting him under contract until 2030. His 4-year extension is 120.4 extension. Guaranteed signing is 40.5. His signing bonus was 13.75. His option bonus is 20 million for 2026, 10 million for 2027. His cap charges spread out at 9.4, 12.25, 23.7, 28.95, 38.85, which is huge, and $36.1 million and that's Sauce Gardner. So, look, I think, there's, given what Gardner's got, given the guaranteed money that he's got, Jaylon Johnson obviously is going to be talking about wanting a new deal. I think, he'll see himself very much on the same sort of level as a Sauce Gardner, for example. He talks about the fact that he does need to keep playing at a high level, being himself, being the top, one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. So he recognises that there is a need to maintain level, to maintain performance. He talks about having to have some more conversations. He wants a long-term contract. He obviously wants to stay a Bear, remain a Bear, which obviously is positive news on that situation. He talks about the fact there are conversations coming up soon. So you can kind of think, that maybe his people have already started putting out those feelers to Ryan Poles and to the Bears front office and saying, look, we want to sit down. We want to agree something more long-term. We want some more money for Jaylon. We don't think that the deal he signed last offseason is now reflective of where we are in the market. He could make life hard. He could demand a trade. I think it's unrealistic. Of course he could. But, it's interesting, isn't it, that this quote came and then the injury came. And I'm not saying they're related. I'm just saying it's strange that it happened so close together. But, it is quite clear from this comment, from these quotes, that he wants more money. He wants a long-term deal, but he wants more money first. Interesting times for Jaylon Johnson and the Chicago Bears. And in terms of that payday for Jaylon Johnson, if you look at that Bears secondary at this moment in time, you look at obviously Jaquan Brisker coming into a contract. Yeah, he's going to need paying, but obviously there's a lot of question marks over his health. His injury record is not good. The concussion record obviously as well. Kevin Byard is another one who struggles to stay healthy. Tyreek Stevenson, there are questions over Tyreek Stevenson. I think he's a solid, decent cornerback, Tyreek. Kyler Gordon has just been paid, obviously. He's now the highest paid nickel corner in the NFL. Jaylon Johnson is definitely the top man in that group. So, I think he, will obviously demand a higher wage. He will demand something more reflective of that position, about being one of the top corners in the NFL and being probably the best secondary player, best defensive back on the Bears roster. And look, the way the market's going, you can't blame him. We can talk about greed. We can talk about team players not putting the team first, but we all know that there's ways and means around the cap and kicking that can down the road, and the cap goes up every single season, and the ways around working, and I'm sure that Ryan Poles will be able to do that. But it does appear that this deal needs to be done at some point, especially if you want to hang on to Jaylon Johnson and not lose him, or him not start making noises about wanting a trade to go somewhere for more money. This is the sort of player the Bears do need to be hanging on to if they're thinking long term and being successful long term. Guys, I'd love to know your thoughts on what Jaylon Johnson had to say. Thank you for watching the Bears Huddle podcast. If you've enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one. Bear down.